today I am so excited to talk about one of my favorite practices in the entire world, nonviolent communication, and to share not only about what this practice is and break it down for all of you, but also talk about how can we scaffold and differentiate this practice for use in the classroom, no matter how old our students are. I've done it with the pre-K kids and everything older than that. So it's all possible, and I can't wait to dig in with you. So before we dive in, I would love if you could settle in with me, something we always do in our 200-hour trainings, which I can share more about at the end. So find a comfortable seated position. Bring length to your spine. Do some shoulder rolls to get any kinks out. Nice. And then maybe clasp your hands above head for a full body stretch. Take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. And then move on over to your right side. Inhale. Exhale. Come back through center to the opposite side. Breathe in and out. And then whenever you're ready, bring your hands to heart center. And just allow your eyes to soften or to close, whatever feels most comfortable to you. And connect to your breath. Observing the rise and the fall of each inhale and each exhale. And as you continue to breathe, I invite you to notice how you're feeling right now. What emotions are showing up for you? Without trying to shift or change how you're feeling, simply just notice with full acceptance. This is where I'm at right now. And one of the most powerful things about nonviolent communication is it allows us to get clear on what we need. So no matter where you're at emotionally, consider, what do I need right now to show up fully in this precious time that we have together? To fill your cup back up. To have you feeling whole and centered and well. What do you need? And maybe you just draw on one word or two words that describe this need. Maybe it's self-compassion or playfulness or love, presence. So naming your need inside, take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Again, inhale. Exhale. Breathe in. Out with a huge sigh. Honoring that need inside you, rub your heart. And then whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes if they're closed. And if you'd like, I would love for you to chat in what you need right now. What are you calling in? I'm sure it's going to be all across the spectrum, and I can't wait to see it. Trust, beautiful. Love, ease, rest, commitment, understanding, peace, joy, safety, calm, warmth, and sunshine, strength of self. Yes, worry less. I feel you. No pressure, relaxation, peace, serenity, love. More time. So beautiful. Well, my loves, thank you so much. It is one of the things that this practice of nonviolent communication has the power to do, both for ourselves and for our students, is help us identify our needs. And I think especially as educators who are, and parents, I see Flor with her little one, cutie pie. As parents, as leaders, we are constantly giving so much of ourselves to support other people's needs. And this practice that I'm going to teach you today really does help you and those that you teach clarify our needs and honor our needs, which is so important for us to sustain the work that we do. So, you ready to dive in? All right, give me a thumbs up, a yes in the chat, emoji, anything. All right, so let's do it. So today is all about us learning to use nonviolent communication in the classroom. And the number one outcome that I actually have for you is not about the classroom. It's about you, as I mentioned, enhancing your own well-being through learning this amazing tool to help you engage in courageous, authentic conversation. So as you're learning and thinking about how do I bring this to my classroom, I also invite you to think, how do I bring this into my life? And how can that support my own well-being and foster well-being in all of my relationships? And then secondly, I obviously hope that you will walk away feeling excited to teach your students to engage in courageous conversations, to address the challenges in their lives and their worlds using this powerful practice. So it is, like I mentioned, time to listen to what we need. So just a little bit of context about what nonviolent communication is. Raise your hand or put it in the chat if you are new to nonviolent communication. Awesome. And then so about half of you, how many of you have been trained in nonviolent communication or use nonviolent communication in your own life? Awesome. So I see there's some of both, which is absolutely perfect. And no matter where you're at in the spectrum, I've practiced nonviolent communication for the last 15 years. And I've gone through many different trainings. I've taught thousands of educators this practice around the country and world. And every single time I come back to it, it is still just as powerful, also just as vulnerable, and will become, it becomes more natural. So I'm excited for you no matter where you're at in the past. So nonviolent communication, for those of you who are newer, is a tool created by a man named Marshall Rosenberg. And the intention is to support us in engaging in really truthful, honest, authentic conversations. And it's really, really helpful to use when conflict or challenge is arising, which obviously, especially in the context of our world today, where there is so much uncertainty and so much happening to our students, to ourselves, to our communities, this practice can be even more relevant than ever before. So the intention, as I mentioned, is to help us engage in conversations. And the beauty of nonviolent communication is that it can be used to have really difficult conversations, which are the ones where we cringe before having them, or we avoid having them at all, or we, don't know what to say or how to say it and freak out about that. So it gives us a framework to have those conversations, but it can also be used to convey love and affection and joy and gratitude. So the structure can be used across the emotional spectrum, and I'll walk you all through how to do it. And then we'll talk, how do we do this for the 4-year-olds and the middle schoolers and the high schoolers? Because that obviously looks different depending on context. So let me walk you through just a couple of the prerequisite skills, which I actually find really powerful, because these are the 3 skills that are critically important for us to embody in order to be able to engage in a nonviolent communication. practice. So the first prerequisite skills is presence. So being present and mindful as we interact with others is this first step to engaging in effective communication. Like if our mind is wandering, if we're thinking about what we're going to say and we're super nervous about it, and we're not being present with the other person, that is really going to have us be challenged in the dialogue itself. So presence is the number one prerequisite skill. The second prerequisite skill is actually the first SEL competency of self-awareness. So the Castle standard, which I love. When we're present, it allows us to cultivate a deeper awareness of how we are feeling in any given moment. So oftentimes when we react or we're triggered or our students are triggered or they're, in a fight with someone or they're really upset or in grief, sad, the emotions can take over, and we often don't necessarily know or take a moment of pause to say, hey, how am I feeling right now? Like, what's going on for me? What do I need? And this practice helps us do that. So from the place of self-awareness, then we get to the third prerequisite skill of nonviolent communication, which is self-management or self-regulation. So when we are aware of how we feel, which happens when we cultivate that second skill, we actually expand our capacity to pause, to reflect, and then to more consciously and thoughtfully respond. And so this practice, if we embody these three skills, can be absolutely life-changing. And in my classroom, it literally fundamentally changed the way my students behaved, connected with each other, solved their own problems instead of me having to come in to solve them for them. It was absolutely inspiring and empowering, and gave my students the tools to effectively address any type of conversation or challenge that they were facing. So I'm super excited to walk you through these steps. So nonviolent communication is 4 steps. The first step is observations. The second step is feelings. The third step is needs. And the fourth step is requests. So I'm going to walk through these 4 steps in just a little bit more detail so that you can have a framework to understand this process. So when we are talking about observations, this is the first stage of the nonviolent communication. And this is when you identify or state what you observed. So you can bottom line what happened without any judgment or opinion. And this is super, super crucial that we remove the judgment or your opinion or any generalizations about what happened. So for example, you're stating just the facts of the situation only in 1 sentence or 2 sentences. We're not going into story of like, yes, or you always throw the clothes on the ground and it makes me so mad because you are always just so dirty and da 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 da, and you don't care about me and blah, 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 blah. All of that's like story and our opinion and judgment put in to the observation. The key here is that we're naming what actually happened, so that when the person that we're communicating with or that our students are communicating with receives this information, they aren't saying, wait, that didn't happen, or that's not true. We want that. So for example, if yesterday my partner, left a shirt on the ground and I wasn't very happy about it, I could say, yesterday, when I came home and your t-shirt was on the ground. That's a fact, right? I came home, the t-shirt was on the ground. I didn't add any story. That's true, right? But if I said, oh, you always leave your t-shirt on the ground, that's an example of what nonviolent communication is not. So I'm just showing you this because I think the distinction between fact and a generalization or opinion is super crucial here in order for this process to work. Next is feelings. So once we've identified what happened, so, yesterday when I came home and your t-shirt was on the bedroom floor, the feeling, then you state your feelings. So I felt or I feel. So we're in the actual nonviolent communication process, which I'll show you in a minute. Marshall Rosenberg has listed out a bunch of feeling words and feeling families that you can draw on to help you identify how you felt as a result of whatever it is that you're communicating about. So I felt sad, frustrated, and confused, for example. And I'll show you what that looks like. And depending on how old your students are, this feelings inventory that he created may or may not be developmentally appropriate. Like for the older students, the middle school, the high schoolers, it's really helpful. But for the younger ones, I'll talk you through how you can differentiate and scaffold for this piece. So once you've identified the feelings, then we talk about the needs. This is when we're identifying and stating your needs. I had you do this in our Settle In together. So like yesterday when you showed up 10 minutes late to our meeting, I felt frustrated, upset, and sad. And then, but why? Why did I do that? Because there's some underlying need that I have that was not met in that situation. So because of my need for, and I could say because of my need for timeliness or communication or integrity, right? So Marshall Rosenberg has also created this needs inventory. It's in the chat. You can pull it up, but I'll also screen share it in a moment so you can see this more concretely. After you've stated the facts of the situation, how you felt as a result, and then said what your needs are that either were or were not met, then you get to make a request. So that might look like, yesterday when you were 10 minutes late and didn't text me or call me to let me know, I felt frustrated, upset, and confused because of my need for communication, authenticity, and respect. So would you be willing to be 5 minutes early to our future meetings? And if you can't do that, text me and let me know. So that's an example of a request. Now, as I mentioned, you can use this framework not only to address challenges or conflict, you can also use it to express positive things. So for example, if my partner brought me roses yesterday, I might say something like, yesterday, when you brought me red roses, I felt excited, loved, and connected because of my need for acknowledgement, appreciation, and romance. So would you be willing to buy me roses every single week for the rest of my life, right? Or would you be willing to acknowledge that you love me forever and ever and ever? Or would you be willing to acknowledge how awesome you are as a partner, right? Maybe I turn it towards him and I let him, the request is for him to identify or appreciate how he's the best. So you can use this structure for all types of communication. And I know that it can be especially helpful to use in challenges because those are the most hard conversations to have usually. So that's really why I start with the challenges. So these requests usually are the most helpful when they're really realistic, tangible appeals, like yes or no answers are encouraged. But sometimes, you may be dealing with an issue that's been around for 10 years, or your students might be dealing with something that they're having a conflict at home with a parent and it's something that's been going on for years. And they're like, wait, but like, how do I do this? Like they always do this. And then I would say, use a fact or the observation from the last time that it happened. You want a concrete example of the situation. And then sometimes with the request, it's like, would you just be willing to acknowledge you heard me? Sometimes it's so scary to even say something. And the problem is really that you've felt unheard, unseen. And so that can be huge. So I just walked you through the general framework to start us with understanding what the process is. And I will also walk you through just the actual packet that we sent that you can use if you're working in, with secondary students. You can literally print out this packet and use it with them as a resource. If you're working with the younger ones, we'll talk about these very, very creative ways that you can do this in your classroom. So here's the breakdown of the 4 steps, what I observe, how I feel, what I need, and the requests. We just went through those. One thing I will say about the feelings part, which we're getting to right here with the feelings inventory, is that one nuance that's crucial when we're teaching this practice or when we're actually using this practice in our own lives is that we use I language when we're talking about our feelings. I know for a long time when I first started nonviolent communication, I used to say, when this happened, you made me feel, or it made me feel. No one can make you feel anything. And so it's so important in this practice that we help our students or ourselves take full responsibility for our emotions. So always I feel or I felt, depending on if you're still feeling this way, you can use present tense, or if you're feeling the way, if you felt that way when the situation arose, you can use past. So in this feelings inventory, there's, as I mentioned, families of feeling words. So this first page of it are the feeling words when you are satisfied. So my rose example of the flowers, like do that over, like I felt inspired and connected and loved. This is the page where you would go to if you're like, ooh, I want to use this framework to share something really inspiring or exciting or engaging. And so these feeling words are on this page. And if you're with middle schoolers or high school students, this is such a great way to increase emotional vocabulary. So a lot of these words are a little bit more complex or nuanced. How old your students are and developmentally where they're at emotionally. Like, are these words a little bit too complex for them? If so, then you can come up with your own lists of words together. That's what I did in my pre-K class. So like, of course they didn't know what the word like jubilant meant. They're 4 years old. However, if you look at kind of the bolder words, a lot of these words like excited or happy, grateful are words that we, either they know or they're words I would want to teach them in terms of their own vocabulary. So what I would do when I'm first thinking about introducing this practice is have let's name all the different types of feelings we can feel in any given day. So let's start with some happy feelings. What are some, feelings when you're feeling happy and then sad? And people will start to say the names of the feelings. And especially with the little ones, visuals are so important because they may not be able to read. So you might want to take pictures of their faces smiling for happy or sad for sad. And then you can create I had a peace corner in my room and I would put up the feelings wall, and it would be like, I would put the word next to it with their face so it can help them identify their feelings, whether or not they knew how to read it. And that's something that is super helpful in the early childhood and elementary realm, because printing out this list would be a little bit too challenging for them. But for the older ones, it's great. So this page, this next one is feelings when your needs are not satisfied. So this would be, when a conflict arises, a challenge, something that you've been avoiding. These are different families of words. And we recommend when you're doing this either for yourself or with like the secondary students, that you invite your students to use 3 words, because emotions are really nuanced. And sometimes when we say we're sad, there's actually more layers to it. It might be like hesitant or petrified and numb. So like saying 3 words can actually tell a lot more of the story and can help us understand our own feelings. So reading through these pages can be really helpful. Now with the younger ones, I wouldn't have them choose 3 words because they might only know like 5 to 10 feeling words, depending on how old they are, or 20 if they're getting to the older ages of elementary, middle. So I would recommend just having them say like, I feel, and then 1 word or 2 words. But for the older ones, the nuanced words are really helpful. So we recommend 3. So I felt, yesterday when you didn't show up to our date, I felt heartbroken, devastated, and withdrawn. So that's another example. So once you've identified the feelings, then you have the needs. It's time to like state, well, these are the needs that I had that either were or were not met in this conversation. So, or in this situation. So just like the feelings inventory, these are in families. And if you're doing nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg has intentionally chosen every single one of these words, both on the feelings inventory and needs inventory, for a reason. So you'll notice in the feelings words ones, there's not like disrespected or disempowered, because those are types of words that actually require someone else to make you feel a certain way. And so like I would not recommend like adding different words necessarily when you're to this, when you're first teaching it, if you're teaching it to the secondary students, because these were intentionally chosen. But if you're going to make it culturally relevant, some of these words might not land with your students, and others might, because of the kind of language they use, or what kind of language their family uses to talk about emotions or needs. So I think it's absolutely okay for you to work with the students to get clear on what kind of words you want to, what needs you have. And these are a list that you can start with. And then in this packet, we have for like a journal reflection that you can invite your students to go through if they're needing to create a boundary, or if something just happened, you can have them first write out the nonviolent communication that they want to do. So often the process of reflection about a challenge is 90% of the battle of getting through it, or working through it, I should say. Because so often we don't even know what needs we had or what emotions we're feeling and why. And so this process of journaling can be so, so helpful. So how do we use this in the classroom? So with the little ones, so early childhood or elementary, raise your hand if you're working with little students, younger students, I should say. Awesome. Me. I love it. Oh, I love the little ones. They're just the best. So if you are physically in a classroom, I love to create like an actual place where this can take place. So in my classroom, I called it the Peace Corner. And I would have to model multiple times how this process works before my students were ready to just do it themselves and solve their own issues. But so in the first few weeks of school, and this really can be introduced at any time, I would first start with like an open-ended conversation, like, you know, about the importance of communication. So like, you know, when we have challenges between each other, how should we address those in communication? And that leads to them, you know, giving you amazing ideas. And likely it's a perfect segue into introducing nonviolent communication, which I actually call, in the school context at Breathe for Change and in our social emotional learning curriculum, we call it the peace process, because I just love thinking about it in more like of a positive, affirmative way. Like, what are we cultivating through doing this piece together? So, I love what's coming through in the chat. So, what I often do when I'm teaching students is I have them, I'll never want to teach this practice in the midst of a really intense conflict, because your students are likely triggered at that point. You want to teach them when you can have a conversation about examples of when conflicts have come up, so then they can work with it. Then when the trigger happens or the conflict arises, you've already taught them the process. You're not trying to teach them in the midst of panic or reactivity. That would be like the most trauma-informed approach and the most effective approach. So I often start by asking asking if anyone has like some issue that they're working with, or I'll make up a scenario and then I'll ask if someone will volunteer. If there's not like an adult in the room, sometimes it's easy if you're working with little ones to have another adult in the room to model it with you a few times. And then after that, scaffold it down to doing it with a student. Like yesterday, and I'll pick developmentally appropriate examples. So like, let's come up with a scenario where we weren't happy in school. Well, yesterday he stole my pencil, right? So so did he really steal it, or what really happened? He took it off my desk. Okay, that's a fact. So yesterday, when you took my pencil off my desk, how did you feel? Sad. I felt sad because of your need for, or because of my need for, and then I'll go through the whole process, and then I'll say like, so would you be willing to give me back my pencil? And then I'll be like, yay, thank you. And then the person would respond. It'd be like role playing, first role playing, always role playing. Do that multiple times. Okay, then let's have another example. And the kids love to be the models. It's always a thing. And then we say, you know, whenever challenges come up in our classroom, it's, you know, we go through this peace process, and we created like the peace corner so that that's the place where we can solve all of our problems. And so what would happen is, you know, I'd say, okay, let's pretend to engage in another issue. And then someone would come to me with a problem. I'd say, okay, let's go solve our problem in the peace corner. Then we'd walk to the peace corner. Everyone would watch us walking to the peace corner. And then we'd have the conversation in the peace corner. And then we'd be like, okay, our problem is solved, and walk back out. I kid you not, within 2 months of school, I had 0 4-year-olds tattling on to me about one thing. Because when they would come to me, I would say, did you try, like, oh, this person did this. I'd say, did you try and solve your problem in the peace corner? Did you do the peace process in the peace corner? Oh, okay. So that'd be my reminder. I wouldn't let them tattle. I would ask them if they've done the process. And so after a few of like that level of training, then all I would ever hear, and this is the cutest thing ever, is, oh gosh, Miss Ilana, we solved our problem in the Peace Corner. He gets 3 bears, I get 2. I only heard solutions. There was never problems because they knew that if they came to me, I wouldn't solve the problems. I wouldn't solve the challenges for them, that they were empowered with the tools to do it themselves. So I'd start with the little ones because from there you scaffold up, right? With the upper elementary school students, similar. Oh, the other thing I would do with the little ones, take pictures of their faces, as I mentioned, and put them in the Peace Corner. Then they're like, oh, that's me. You know, they love it. And then as you as the school year goes by, you can introduce new emotion words. And this is the same for any grade. Introduce new emotion words. What does frustrated mean? What does it look like when we're frustrated? How does it feel? And then you could say, okay, should we add that to the list? So you're building their vocabulary. So I would very similar process with any elementary school students. You know, obviously the way you engage and talk to them is a little bit different, but in general, definitely doing the open conversation around communication, what to do and not to do. Let them like proactively support that conversation and tell you and lead that conversation. And then after, you can have them come up with some scenarios or some examples of things that have even come up in the classroom this week, or in their homes this week, and you can use those, or you can make them up depending on how you would know, depending on the context, if certain issues that have just arose in the class are like, they're complete, they're done. You can use that as an example versus you want to make something up because that's still a little challenging. And so for the example, might want to make it up. And then you can say, you know, if anyone in the class has any issues, you can practice working through it using these 4 steps. So then, you know, model it a few times and use that same empowering thing. It's like, this is, you know, can we like raise your hand if you are into all of us, like using this tool, this peace process to help us solve our problems. You'll get all their buy-in. And that's really important, right? Because what doesn't work is when we say, this is how you have to solve your problems. You're done. That's not how they're solving their problems. If you tell them that's how they have to do it, you really want to encourage them to see the value in it, to practice it, to role play it. It's almost like a game to them. And so then when the situation happens that this needs, like where nonviolent communication or the peace process can be the most effective, they already know how to do it. They know where to do it. And they also know examples of what it looks like. And I think it's really helpful also to show examples of what it doesn't look like, because that is just as important to show what it does. So if I was saying the pencil example, like yesterday when you took the pencil off my desk, that really happened. You remember that, I remember that. But if I said, yesterday you grabbed my pencil and it was so mean and I hated it, is that nonviolent communication? No, right? So giving them yes and no examples so that then you're helping train them what it actually looks like and doesn't look like. And then as you get older, middle school students, high school students, I mean, I would walk them through the 4 steps that I just taught you, and also give them the packet. The middle school, I would say, depending on where your middle schoolers are at developmentally, you might want to create your own list of emotions and needs with them, and have it be collaborative. Or you might say, hey, like, let's go through this list. Like, which words are you familiar with? Which ones are you not? Let's talk about the ones that you're not. And then like other students can help teach them the ones that they're not. So it's another way to build out the vocabulary. And then, you can have them. I mean, in our trainings with educators and in the trainings I do with middle schoolers and high schoolers, I usually go through like an actual process where they journal those 4 steps. I have them think about something that they're working through in their life right now. And it can be positive or negative. I don't want to make people focus on something negative if they're in a state that isn't like I want to be trauma informed and potentially keep it open if they're not ready to go there right now. But oftentimes I'll say, this is so helpful to help you deal with something that's challenging. So I recommend that you try and journal an example that's relevant to you right now, that you want to work through. And then I'll have them pair up in partners, and each person gets like 5 minutes. One person, you tell, like if I'm talking to Loretta and I'm like, Loretta, you're my dad. So in this situation, will you be my dad? And you'll be like, yes. And then I'll be like, okay, so, hey, dad. And then you'll have them role play. And then in the actual peace process or nonviolent communication, the role of the listener is to listen through all 4 steps. So you're not interrupting after you say, when you did this, or when this happened. There's like, wait, no, this happened. You have to listen to all until the request, and then you reflect back what you heard. So you'd say like, I heard that yesterday when I gave you roses, it made you feel inspired and excited and happy because of your need for love, connection, and devotion. So yes, I will give you different flowers every single week. So you kind of reflect back whatever you heard. You may not hear the exact words, and that's fine. But in terms of training other people, especially if you're training all of your students, you would model also that mindful listening and reflecting back piece. And you would have them practice both of those together, not just the talking, but how are we responding? So if someone comes to me and says, I need to do the peace process with you, how are you showing up for that conversation is really important in order for it to become like a class culture kind of thing. And then after that, whenever students come to you with challenges or problems or tattling or anything, then this is like, again, how you respond to that. You could get reactive and be like, why are you doing that? Da, da, da. Or you could say, have you done the peace process with whatever that person's name is? And they'll either say yes or no. But if you've created that as a norm in the class, then they'll know that that's just what's next, right? So you're giving that, it takes a while, right? Like they may not be used to this process, but it's literally a game changer. And then they end up using it with their moms and their friends at recess, and their siblings. And for me, it's become just the way I talk, like how and everyone on our team across the nation, all of our trainers, it's literally how we engage, especially with challenges when we're communicating with each other. Whenever we just know, all right, sometimes we'll just be like, hey, I need to have a nonviolent communication with you. And we'll be like, okay, let's go. But you can use this process whether or not the receiver that you're talking to knows about nonviolent communication. So it's definitely something that it's like again, what are the facts here? What are my feelings about those? What are the needs that I have? And what's the request I want to make? And then so I've just put a lot out there for you. I would love to open up space for questions. I see a bunch of questions coming into the chat. Let's see. So the packet, if you want the packet, is there's a link in the chat. How do you recommend building in time for this in middle school where they have multiple different teachers and they may not have time during class to learn this process? Great question. One of the things that I found to be so powerful is if I were working in a middle school or a high school, one of the ways in which I would think about having like a school-wide impact around this, it'd be to teach the other teachers this tool. and say this can be a way that we solve, that all of us across the entire school help our students solve their challenges. And I'd say the most you can teach this, I would find a way. I mean, you know, I think that if you can't find 5, 10, 15 minutes to teach this at some point, like it's worth cutting something else. Like this will end up saving so much of your time for the whole year if you actually just upfront support and train your students to use this powerful process. So I would recommend, if you can't find the time, do a video of yourself talking about it, give them the packet to read through for homework, and do a journaling, and then have them do it with someone in their life, and come back and for your little opening, say, turn to a partner and talk about what your experience practicing this thing was. So like you could even make it like a home assignment. But I would definitely recommend that you do build in some time to just teach it, because it doesn't take very long to teach, but it has unbelievable effects for the entire year. And if you're doing it at a school-wide level, then as students go from one class to the other class to the other class, and everyone's kind of consistently supporting their students, then it becomes a school-wide culture thing. And that's really, really powerful. Let's see, what other questions? I see a few of you have your digital hands up. Dawn, Dawn, are you there? Oh, I need to let you unmute. There we go. Do you have a question, Dawn? Or Sabrina?
Hello.
Hello.
My question is, what happens when students take this outside of the classroom and they're interacting with someone who is not in the practice of mindful presence?
I am so glad you asked. So I think it's so important when you're explaining nonviolent communication that you reinforce the fact that the success of nonviolent communication has nothing to do with how someone else responds to you at all. So if they respond no to your request, or they're, reactive, or not responding in the way you would hope, that's totally okay. The purpose of this practice is for you to get clear on what you need to communicate in order to speak your truth in a nonviolent way. And so everyone has their own personal right to respond however they want. And we get the power to be able to, really think through what is important for us to say in order for us to feel complete. So, and we have to be okay with them. Like, it's up to them. Everyone has their own freedom to respond. And so that's why I really love the journaling part, because sometimes literally you don't even end up needing to communicate afterwards, because you realize, I just realized one of my needs wasn't met. And now that I know that my needs not met, like I feel fine about that situation. Like, so it really is about us individually healing through communicating truthfully and courageously. So I'm glad you asked that question, because it's super important. And I see this is literacy. It's totally literacy. It's totally literacy. What about spending some time in morning meetings or an advisory? Exactly. Like any time that you can spend just finding that little amount of space, it will save you time, like times 20 later on. And in our 200-hour training, we go way, way, way deeper into the nonviolent communication, like crazy. So this was like little taste for all of you in terms of how you can use this practice. But in our 200 hour, you will end up like literally embodying this practice for the rest of your life. I mean, I've had our trainees, I've had marriages saved, relationships rekindled after not speaking for 10 years. You know, a 16-year-old child refell back in love with his mom after like being angry at her since he was 5. I mean, like crazy things just from using this structure, because we're so often ingrained in adding all of this resentment and you know, to the conversations that really doesn't open up space for the listener to just hear you in terms of what's really truthfully there, which is like at the essence of this, it's like my feelings and what I need. And when you can get to the essence of what matters, then relationships get rekindled. And it's so, so powerful. So I hope that this was helpful. I want to hear all about how you end up using this. If you have loved ones in your life, which I know all of you do, whether it's family or friends or colleagues, I totally recommend sharing this packet with them, talking them through it, practicing, be like, hey, I just learned this thing at a workshop, at a Breathe for Change workshop. You want to try it out with me? And then you can practice it. And the other thing about doing it with your students, if you're not doing it yourself, don't even try, because this at Breathe for Change, like in our whole 200 hour, we talk about, or like our social emotional learning curriculum, and we tag on an F to SEL, so it spells self, because it's so critically important that we embody the practices that we want to teach our kids. So if we are, you know, communicating with them to them violently or in a way that doesn't align with this structure, but we're expecting them to do it, it's just not going to happen. And like it's sending them mixed messages about, so like I would definitely recommend that you communicate to your students in this way consistently in order for it to really land for both you and your students. Like when someone does something amazing in your class, like yesterday when you raised your hand and spoke up for the first time in community circle, I felt inspired and proud and excited because of my need for your voice and courage and participation. So would you be willing to raise your hand more often and share your perspective? Because we learned so much from it. Like you can use nonviolent or the nonviolent communication or the peace process to affirm your kids. And also like, you know, yesterday or, you know, right now, when I hear all these voices talking in the midst of this lesson, I'm feeling frustrated, upset, and you know, sad because of my need for listening, acknowledgement, and support. So would you be willing to keep your conversations until the end of this discussion or whatever we're doing? So you can see like it, the more you use it just naturally in terms of like what's happening, they're going to pick up on that and then they're going to start to use it themselves.